Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone, all of you in the room and all of you looking by your computers. Welcome to this seminar arranged by VINNOVA on how to prepare a successful application to the Marie Curie program. For you viewers by your computers, you will be able to see my email address, Judith Befer. My name is Judith Befer, for all you who don't know me. And you can send emails during this talk, and then I'll try to answer you as soon as I possibly can after this seminar. And for you sitting here, we have quite a busy schedule today, so I'll ask you to keep your questions to the end of each presentation, and then we'll leave some room for discussion at the end of each of these parts. So I will start shortly with introducing the Marie Curie program to you. And then we will have a Marie Curie Fellow here with us today, who will share with you her experiences. We'll have a short break, just a leg stretcher, and then we'll gather back in the room and talk more about the Marie application, how to do more practical in details. And after that, my colleague Morten Jansson, who has vast experiences of the Marie Curie program, will share his experience with you, and then we'll have a discussion around that. And afterwards, there will be coffee served outside, and we can talk more, and I can talk to you more in person as well if you have questions. So by that, I'll start for today's seminar with saying that we are here at VINNOVA, and that's not only because we are the governmental agency looking for increasing competitiveness of researchers and companies in Sweden. We are also the contact agency for the European Research Programme. And the European Research Programme has approximately the same goal and ambition that we have. The 7th Framework Programme is the European Commission's Programme for Research and Innovation. It has almost 55 billion euros to distribute over 7 years. And they do so because they want to increase, like this. They want to increase the competitiveness of European research, like this, and also the careers for career perspectives for European researchers. This huge research program is divided in 4 major parts. You have them here behind me. The cooperation, that's a collaborative project. It's almost 2/3 of the budget. The idea programs, that's the ERC, the European Research Council. The capacities, the capacity building program, and the people program, the Marie Curie program. And that's the one that I will be talking about more today. The people program has almost 10% of the whole budget. So it has around 5 billion euros to spend on researchers' careers and mobilities during these 7 years. And they do this because the European Research Commission, European Commission, has acknowledged mobility and research careers to be very important for the growth of European economy and research capacities. So the people program, that's also known as Marie Curie Actions, and I will from now on talk about Marie Curie, and that will be synonym with the people program, is to stimulate individuals to enter the profession of being a researcher. They also want the European researchers to stay in Europe, researchers from the entire world to be attracted to Europe, and make Europe more attractive to the best researchers. And they also acknowledge that the mobility is a key issue in this, in the career development, but also in sharing and transfer knowledge. It's very important for the researchers to move between countries, between sectors, between organizations. So therefore, they have devoted this program, this part of the 7th Framework Program, to mobility. And I think this is very important to keep in mind if you decide to go for a Marie Curie application. Keep this in mind, that they are funding you because they want to achieve this. This is the main goals for spending 5 billion euros on you. So why mobility? What's the fuss? So what's the importance? The European Commission has identified, among many other actors, that mobility allows acquisition of new skills, new knowledge, and new perspectives, all contributing to the creativity, efficacy, and performance. So this is what they feel that mobility shall achieve. So when you consider moving somewhere to take up postdoc studies or a Marie Curie Fellowship, you have to consider, will this mobility give this to me? Will I be able to prove in my application that this mobility that I propose will give me this new knowledge and new perspectives, etc.? Because this will be evaluated in your project proposals, because this is what they want to fund, not only your research project. So this is what they want mobility to achieve. But mobility is also an eligibility criteria. They have strict rules for what they consider to be a genuine mobility. So what they do first, they see, is this researcher, oh, sorry. Okay. Shall I mute? No? Okay. Sorry, I sort of lost track there. Mobility, yes, eligibility. The reason you have, in your project proposal, you propose a mobility. And that mobility in eligibility criteria needs to be at least 12 months the last 3 years. And by that, I mean that if you're moving to another country, for example, if you will be moving from Sweden to Spain, you will not be allowed to be in Spain for the last 12 months, the last 3 years. Or if you're coming to Sweden, if you came in February this year, you're perfectly fine. Your mobility will be considered being a genuine mobility to Sweden. But if you arrived here last April, not this April, but April in 2011, then you will not be considered eligible for Marie Curie Fellowship, because you will not be able to prove mobility. And this is for all the different Marie Curie Fellowships. So this is very, very central. Is this clear? I just sort of got lost there when I had to fix the microphone. Yes. Great. Thank you. There is one exception from this rule that I'm trying to prove. In one of these, there is an intra-European fellowship where you move between countries in Europe. If you've been out of research, if you've been unemployed, on maternity leave, etc., for at least 12 months, there are other eligibility criteria regarding mobility, and I'll come back to that later. Just want to make note that star there. There are one exception to this rule, but otherwise, this is the mobility that's for all Marie Curie Fellowships. I'll go through some other definitions that will come back in this kind of Marie Curie kind of projects. Experienced researchers. We will be talking today about the Marie Curie individual fellowships, and they are all directed to experienced researchers, and that is equal to having a PhD, to have your PhD exam, or at least 4 years full-time research experience. And that is counted from when you achieved that exam that allowed you to continue on doctorate studies. So either having a PhD exam or being allowed to be a PhD for at least 4 years and doing research experience during that time. So that's an experienced researchers. Europe, that's another key word that will come back today. When I say Europe in this sense, I mean the 42 European countries that either are member states or associate countries to the 7th Framework Programme. So these countries are considered to be Europe in this context. All other countries are considered to be a third country. Anything outside Europe in this context will be a third country. And this will be important soon when I go through the eligibility and all different kind of Marie Curie instruments there are. So these are definitions that we'll come back to later. So there are also some key principles that all Marie Curie instruments will adhere to. Because as I said, the European Commission wants to make Europe more attractive for researchers to perform, to have a research career here in Europe. And therefore they have identified a few principles that they want all Marie Curie actions to follow. For example, if you are funded in a Marie Curie program, you should be employed with an employment contract with full social rights. Your project will also be peer reviewed in an international evaluation, which will give you some certain sort of marker of quality, because it's very high quality of Marie Curie projects. Adequate working conditions. You will be treated in a fair way at your workplace. And also bottom-up approach. All project proposals that go to Marie Curie projects are bottom-up. They're investigator-driven. You yourself as a researcher propose the research idea. What you have to do is to define between evaluation panels where your proposal shall be evaluated. But your project proposal comes from yourself. It's not dictated what you should do your research on. So those are the key principles. That's also true for all Marie Curie actions. And the Marie Curie actions, the major ones are divided in two major blocks of different instruments. The host-driven networks, they are initial training networks directed for postgraduates, or industry academia exchange programs, the partnerships and pathways. They are applied by host organizations, by universities, industry, institutes, etc., that apply to the European Commission, and then they post vacancies within the program. The other ones, the individual fellowships, they are directed towards the fellows themselves. The fellows will apply, and they, together with the host organization, directed to the Commission, and you as a fellow will also report and manage your project yourself. So if you would be looking for a vacancy within these networks, and usually they are quite close to more industrial kind of research, because industry is usually expected to participate in the networks, you could look at the website of Euraccess. And Euraccess is a European portal where they gather, there are some seats over here, or also in the middle. They gather valuable information for researchers moving around in Europe, and each country has their own portal. So for Sweden, you can go in and see for Swedish working conditions, etc. And also vacancies posted here, and here you can look for these networks vacancies. But for today, we will focus on the individual fellowships. And I'll go through the kind of different individual fellowships there are, and also how to apply for them this year. There are 4 of them. There are 4 instruments that I will talk about today. The intra-European fellowships within Europe, the international outgoing fellowships out of Europe, and incoming international fellowships, researchers coming into Europe, and career integration grant. And that's more like a stipend, a lump sum grant that will cover project expenses. The other ones are fellowships, and that's a different. But I will go through each of them in detail. They are all different instruments with different objectives and different purposes. There are different purposes for why the European Commission are funding them, and therefore also slightly different eligibility criteria, and also how the application should look like. The individual, it says individual European fellowship, it should say intra-European fellowships, IEF, intra-European fellowships. The objectives of this instrument, the first of the 4, is to support career development of experienced researchers, that is, everyone with a PhD exam or 4 years full-time experience, to enhance skills acquisition at multidisciplinary level, and that's sort of the mobility thing, and also to support researchers in attaining and or strengthening a leading independent position. That's a career goal and objective. Or to assist researchers to resume a career research after a break. And this is the career restart. If you have been unemployed or out of research for at least 1 year, then you can apply to a career restart panel. The main features is that you should move within Europe, and that is here between the member states or associated countries, the 42 countries that I listed. If you move within them, that is fine, but the mobility rule applies. So you have to show mobility for the last 12 months, the last 3 years, within the last 3 years. If you not apply for the career restart panel, then it's the last 3 years of the 5. You can ask me if you are wondering about this career restart panel, because it's a new rule, so it's a bit tricky to explain. The application is submitted by the researcher together with a host organization, and it's supposed to be between 12 to 24 months. That's the intra-European fellowship. The individual incoming fellowship, which should be international incoming fellowship, is supposed to come into Europe. It's knowledge sharing by recruiting top-class researchers active outside. So we want to gain research knowledge and competence and experience into Europe, and also to develop research cooperation between Europe and third countries. So these fellowships are also aimed at building long-lasting cooperation. And also possible to have a return phase depending on what country you come from in the beginning. And there are lists of, if you come from certain countries, you can get a grant to go back and restart your research career in the country where you originated from. And the main features is that you should come from a third country, so you have to show mobility from outside Europe the last 12 months of the last 3 years. And you apply together with your host organization, and it's for between 12 to 24 months. And if you would apply for a return phase, then you can have 12 months of return phase. The outgoing fellowships, it's the international dimension of the career of European researchers. So you're supposed to go out of Europe, gain research in a third country, and then come back, and to transfer this acquired knowledge into organizations in Europe. And I'll show an example of this. So there are two phases, an initial outgoing phase and a reintegration phase in Europe. And you do not have to come back to the country of your origin, so to speak. So if you're a German researcher active in Sweden, you can apply to go to New York for 2 years and come back to Sweden for 1 year, or to choose somewhere else, Spain, Italy, as long as you've decided that beforehand, before you put together your application. But you have to do that with your European host. Your European host has to say that we will take care of this researcher for 1 year after they come back from their outgoing phase. And there will be the grant agreement, the agreement with the Commission will be made with the European host, and the European host will have an agreement with the international host. And this is an example to describe it more. So you choose a host organization in Europe. You go outside for 12 to 24 months, and then you come back to Europe for at least 12 months. So that's how it's made. And the Commission will make their agreement together with the European host. So you have to identify the European host already at the beginning. And this is also to show what are the main countries that the researchers choose when they do international outgoing fellowships. It's Canada, United States, Australia, New Zealand are the top chosen countries with this fellowship. So what I just described to you is more detailed described in the work program that I publish each year. This one is already published because it was published on the March 13th, and the deadline is 16th August this year. And the evaluation is supposed to be during the autumn, and you'll be able to sign contract if you're lucky in spring 2013. And together for this year, it's a total of almost 800 million euros to be distributed to researchers for doing these fellowships. And the calls are published on participant portal, and I will go back to that later with what that is and where you can find these calls. So what you get, the community contribution, if you're applying for these fellowships, you will get a living allowance and get a mobility allowance. This money depends on who you are and where you will perform your research. So it depends on your level of experience. You see that there are two different lump sums depending on your level of experience, but it's also depending on where you are performing your research. So if you go to Sweden, for example, this lump sum will be corrected with a correction coefficient factor. And if you go to Denmark, that will be another factor, etc. So it's sort of adjusted to what European country you will be working in. In addition to this, there will be some money also going to your host organization, the research networking costs and overhead. And your host organization has to pay this money to you. That what's in these fellow expenses, that needs to be paid to you, not less. But they can pay you more. But from this, taxes and social fees will be deducted. So you have to get in contact with your host organization to know what kind of money you will be able to get as a salary, because that will not be the same as this. And as the tax levels differs between countries, and also what kind of social fees that are deducted differs between organizations, you have to get in contact with administrative personnel in your host organization to discuss your level of salary beforehand. But they are allowed to pay you much more than this if they want to, but then they'll have to top it up themselves. So I would recommend you to discuss this early on in the application process. For the career integration grant that I'll talk about a bit more soon, it's a lump sum of 25,000 euro per year. just given to you, and it can cover part of your salary, or it can cover laboratory expenses or what you choose. But the fellowships, they will have contributing to your salary. So the career integration grants. As I said, it's a lump sum, and it's here illustrated by Zlatan Ibrahimovic, and it's to illustrate that he was in Barcelona for a while, playing football. It didn't go very well for him in Barcelona for different reasons, so he decided to go to another European country to maybe restart his career, which he did very well. As we know, it went very well for him, and if he had been within research, he would have been able to apply for the career integration grants. Fortunately, I don't think that he needs the 25,000 euros lump sum, but could need it. So the thing is that if you want to establish a research career in some other country than you are at the moment, you can apply for this sum. And it's to transfer the knowledge from where you are now into your new host, and also to increase the prospect of your career. You have to show that my career will be better off if I get this money and if I get this position. The thing is that the host organization has to offer you an employment contract for the time that you apply for the grant. So this is one of the key principles coming back, that they want everyone funded by Marie Curie should have employment contracts with full social rights. So they have to say that we're employing these researchers, and then you'll be able to get 25,000 euros per year. You can also go back to your home country, no nationality requirements, but you have to move countries. The mobility rule applies. And this one has a deadline of 18th September. And it's 40 million euros for this year's call. And also these details are described in the work program, and I'll come back to that later. Just a few statistics to show you before I leave for Hiske to talk about her experiences. The dark blue staples here represent the success rates for the whole European researchers applying to each of these three different calls: the intra-European, the international outgoing, international incoming fellowships. And the lighter blue ones represent Swedish host organizations. So as you can see, the success rates are quite similar on European level for the three different instruments, and a bit lower for the Swedish host organizations. And it's a bit even lower on the international incoming fellowships, and I have to say that the volume is quite small on the researchers applying for this, so that's why I would not take that number so seriously. But as you can see, the success rates are fairly same on a European level, and it's, I would say, around 15, 16, 18% success rate. So I think it's fairly good. And if you, as I said, there are 9 different panels that you have to choose, and this will represent the 9 different panels and the number of applications submitted to each of these. And here you can see that the life science panel is dominating. But what is done then is the budget is distributed accordingly to the submitted proposals. So the success rates are equalized. So they're supposed to be the same success rate in all the panels, but the number of submissions differs, as you can see. So you have to choose them between these 9 ones: chemistry, economics, engineering, etc. And then you submit so that your proposal is evaluated by the right kind of experts. And this is to show the budget distribution during these 7 years that the framework program has run. And as you can see, the intra-European fellowships has increased even more this last year. It's 120 million euros to be distributed compared to 110 last year. So this is a good year to apply for the intra-European fellowships. The international ones are on equal level of 40, but I think the success rate has been quite stable for those the last years. So by that, I will leave the floor to Dr. Hiske van Dunen, who's supposed to talk about her experiences.
Okay.
And maybe I should just ask if there are any, sorry. Yes, maybe I should just ask if there are any questions about what I was just talking about. Any questions on, I will come back to the eligibility a bit more, and I will also talk more about the applications. Any questions so far? Yes?
Moving outside, does that have sustainability requirements?
should not have been in Sweden for more than...
The international outgoing, you're not, the eligibility rules for international outgoing, you're not allowed to have been in the outside Europe country for more than 12 months the last 3 years. So you're allowed to have been in Sweden and going to the States, for example, but you're not allowed to have been in the States for more than 12 months. So I move on. Thank you.
Things around again. Okay. So hi, I'm Hiske van Duinen. I come originally from the Netherlands, but I wrote a Marie Curie Fellowship as an international incoming fellow because I was living in Australia for 3 years before I came here. And I'll be telling about how I wrote my fellowship and also how my colleagues wrote theirs, because in my lab, one of my colleagues, he got an intra-European fellowship last year. And one of our other former colleagues just moved outside of Sweden. She moved to Singapore, so she had a successful outgoing fellowship. What I've done is I've looked at all. You get a really nice report on your on your application, in which they give the strengths and the weaknesses of your application. So I use these strengths and weaknesses to give some tips of how to write your application and what to think about. And as you can see, Claudia was successful in the first year. Malin wasn't, but she was very successful in the second year. She had a very high score. I just missed out the first year, but because I only started on the 1st of September, officially at KI, I had another year to apply for my incoming fellowship, and then I was successful. So some practicalities, what to think of. First of all, check the deadline. Well, it's the 16th of August, we know that. And then check whether you're eligible for which of the programs, where do you want to go and where do you come from. First, I thought I should be intra-European fellowship because I'm European, but because I had been outside of Europe, I suddenly turned out to be an international incoming fellow. Then contact your host. You have to work at your host, and they have to pay for some of the costs, so they have to want you to work there. So that's very important. Furthermore, when you write your application, they'll also ask you for references, and the Marie Curie, they're very good with their timing. When you're writing, it's summer holidays, so you have to make sure that when you apply, that your referees know that they will have to log into the system and also send in their references, even though they might be on holidays. Yeah, so I'll go through this. Like I said, the contact with the host is very important. You have to have a top host, otherwise they won't award your application. I know someone that did a double host construction, so she chose a top host somewhere else, but had 2 hosts, so the actual host where she was going to work was not a top host, but there was a top host on the application. So sometimes you can play around with those kind of things. Also, you need, like I said, contact the host before. You need all their information to fill in the forms that you'll probably discuss later this afternoon, I assume. Yeah, and like I also mentioned before, even though the fellowship will pay your salary, the host will pay for administration costs, so they have to be happy that you're coming. Then the referees, like I said, they need to log in, so they need to know that they have to do that even though it's a holiday period. Then you have to register at the website, and you'll also hear about that later this afternoon, I assume. When you register, you have to have an acronym for your proposal, and a title, and an abstract. And you can't change the acronym and the title. There will be another abstract later on that can be different, but when you register, you do have to have an acronym and a title for your project. And then when you have, before you submit, really check everything 10 times. And I assume that most host institutions will have a grants office, and they should have some experience with Marie Curie Fellowships. So let them go through the application if they have time, so they can make sure that you're not missing out on something. Then the B part, that's the proposal itself. In total, there's a maximum of 26 pages, including a first and a last page that you cannot change. So to get everything in, you just have to play with the margins and shorten the references. Then, like I said, I have an international incoming fellowship. Most of the headings of the different proposals are the same. So all of them start with a scientific and technological quality. And the third part is researcher, the fourth part implementation, the fifth part impact, and the last bit ethics. The second part differs for the outgoing and for the incoming, and for the international outgoing and for the intra-European one. The second bit is training activities, and for the incoming it's the transfer of knowledge. So which knowledge are you bringing into Europe? And we'll go through all of this. So these are now the tips that I took out from the strengths and weaknesses that we had on our proposals. They like interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary aspects of the proposal. So if you can cross disciplines, or if you can show that you can cross disciplines, it's really good. They like state-of-the-art methodology, and they want it to be original and innovative. So use state-of-the-art somewhere in your proposal, at least once. Furthermore, the timeliness and the relevance of the project. So you have to have up-to-date literature references, and also, and you have to show that that your project is feasible. In fact, and your host scientific should have expertise in the field. So if you're going somewhere, they should be really good at what they're doing. And the quality of the group and the researchers in charge is also very important. So the host CV is very important. And then the other things, they want you to clearly state the aims of each section in the proposal. So you're writing your whole proposal with the background, with the aims spread throughout. But the first comment I got that I thought my aims were really clear, and apparently they weren't. So the second time around, I just underlined the aims in every section, and then they said I had really clear aims. Well, I didn't change the text, I just underlined them. Yeah, so just underline your aims, can be really clear. So like I said, be up to date with the references. Present some expected results. So if you have some pilot data, show them. As you kind of been in the lab for a few months already when you're applying. So if you then can show that your project proposal actually might work because you have some pilot data, it's always good. So stress the novelty, stress the interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, or cross-disciplinary aspects. Methodology, they like complex and well-designed proposals. Yeah, and like I said, stress the quality of the host and the host lab. Also, if your host lab has many postdocs that already have Marie Curies, it's also good for you. Or PhD students that are working on their own grants, just stress it when you're describing your host lab that there are good people working there, because it means that you will be working with those people. and so you'll be able to learn things from each other. And also when you have different backgrounds, both nationalities, but also scientifically, if you have some cognitive psychologists working together with neuroscientists or with mathematicians, then you can stress that there will be a lot of interdisciplinary, even if the project is not so interdisciplinary, because you have all these interdisciplinary people there, you can be better, become better. Then the second section, the transfer of knowledge, or the training activities. So they want you to bring new knowledge to Europe, and they want you to be able to transfer this new knowledge. So the transfer of knowledge, tell them that you're going to conferences in Europe to show your results. You will publish, you'll have technical and communicational skills, and show how your host lab will benefit from the skills that you're bringing, and that you can create courses or teach others to use those skills. And then from the inter-European and the international outgoing, clearly structure your training objectives and show that the skills you're learning, that you will then transfer them back to Europe if you're going out of Europe. So that's very important. I thought this was the hardest part of the proposal, because how can you bring new knowledge to Europe that hasn't been there? But apparently it is possible, but yeah. Then the researcher, and so research including your CV. So research experience, the results, and you have to show you can think independently and that you have leadership qualities. And then they want to see that there is a match between the fellow's profile and the project. So with the research experience, show your key discoveries and your areas of knowledge. Of course, you want to have publications. If you already have international collaborations, it shows that you can work with different people and that the mobility will be useful in the end as well. If you have awards, prizes or grants, put them on there. How to show you can think independently or that you have leadership qualities. It's like teaching and training of other students, mentoring students. If you have leadership positions both within science and outside science, or if you've been involved in organizing conferences, all those kind of things, you really have to stress on your CV. And with collaborations, it's also important, if you have initialized them, that also shows that you have leadership qualities. And then that you show that you have the capacity to learn new things and then transfer them again. The match between the fellow's profile and the project, so show that you have complementary experiences and skills that the project asks from you. And another one is show a future career plan, and preferably in Europe. So that's if you're international incoming, you show that you want to stay in Europe. If you're intra-European, you also want to stay in Europe. And when you go out, stress that you want to come back in Europe and build up your career in Europe. Then the implementation, with subheadings of the quality of the infrastructure and the facilities, and the international collaborations of the host, the practical arrangements for the implementation and management of the project, the feasibility and the credibility of the project, including a work plan, and the practical and administrative arrangements and support for the hosting of the fellow. Most of this information is probably available at your host institution. So they'll have all these documents showing how good they are. So use those and just adjust the text a little bit. So that's also why you have to contact the host, because all this information, or most of this information, will be supplied by your host, except for the feasibility of the work plan. That's something you have to do. So with the host, show that you have access to the core facilities and name the collaborators whose expertise you can access. So if they have good collaborations, and then you will benefit from that as well. If there are group meetings and departmental seminars, you will be able to get feedback from a broader audience, which is also good. If you can show that the lab you're going to has funding already, preferably both national and international, then they know that you're in a secure place to do your research. Then the feasibility and credibility of the project, including work plan. So you have to have high goals, but you have to be realistic. You can have really high goals, but if they can see, no, she's never going to make it, then they won't give you the money. If you have a little bit lower goals, but it seems to be feasible, then you're more likely to get the money. Someone said, use a graphical timeline. It will save actually a lot of space if you have to describe in the first 3 months. Because they want to have a lot of details about the data acquisition, as much details as possible. So if you use it graphically, and then you don't have to describe in the first month, I'll do this, but if you use a graphical timeline, it will be very intuitive, and then you can have more space left to give details about the data acquisition. Yeah, and then the practical and administrative arrangements. At KI, they have a grants office with a lot of experience in supporting Marie Curie Fellows. So, yeah, depends on who is your host, but assumably, if you pick a good host, they should have experience with Marie Curie Fellows, so contact their grants office, because they'll know a lot about how to write and what is necessary for your application. Then the impact, it has the subheadings, the potential for creating long-term collaborations and mutual beneficial cooperation between Europe and a third country, contribution to European excellence and European competitiveness, the benefit of the mobility to the European research area, and the impact of the proposed outreach activities. The first point, just show the potential for long-term collaborations. If you're coming from outside Europe, it's good if that's a good lab, because that also, then the host lab will also benefit from this collaboration with the lab where you're coming from. And your host will benefit from your skills and your expertise. Then the outreach activities, you can use media like Facebook and Twitter. They like it if you use social media to reach out. And then, like I said, implement this future career plan in Europe. And they also like if you have clinical applications, so of course, depending on the kind of project you're writing, but yeah, they like that. Then ethical issues. This part doesn't have a page limit, and there's an ethical issues table. What I did, I work with human subjects, so I listed all the methods. In section B1, you had to describe your research methodology. So in the ethical section, I just listed all those methods again, saying in which experiments am I going to use them, and what are the risks and the discomforts of these methods. And you have to show them that you'll get ethical approval before you start the experiments. And they actually want to have the proof of those ethical approvals before you can start your experiments, before they let you sign the or before you get the grants agreement, actually. So then we're getting back to some practicalities again, because so the invitation for if you're successful with this first bit, with getting your application in, and then hey, yay, you get invited for a negotiation. They do this just before Christmas, and then exactly after Christmas, you have to respond to all the questions they ask. So again, everyone's on holidays, but you have to reply immediately. Officially, the host of the host lab has to be in contact. So your supervisor has to be in contact with the project officer that you get. But that's in theory. So in practice, you have to say, oh, my supervisor is on holiday, so I hope it's all right if I communicate with you, with the project officer. And they usually think it's okay. But you have to say, I know I'm not the one supposed to be in contact with you, but... So, and then you have to give more, sometimes most of the times they want more details about the ethical section. Yes, depending on the project. But yeah, don't plan, if you're planning to submit now this summer, don't plan extensive Christmas holidays because you won't get them. Yeah, no, you won't get them. Then, if you've answered to their questions, you have to wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. I think I waited for 3 months before I then got an answer back with a full ethical review report. So again, I had to address all the questions and recommendations and requirements that they had written in their report. And then you get an email saying, oh, now we've closed the negotiation. That was a bit scary, but then they said they started setting up the grant agreement, and then it's something between the funding agency, so between Marie Curie and the grants office of your institution. And then you'll hopefully get it. So good luck, all of you.
Thank you. I just sneak on your microphone. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Any questions for Hiske? So,
yeah.
So if my lab here in Sweden already has a collaboration with the lab I want to go to in the States,
yes.
Is that good or bad? I've co-published with them before, but it's a really good lab.
I don't know.
I would say it's a good thing, because you show that you have the possibility to develop long-term collaboration, etc. But you have to show that the mobility is of gain for you. So the question was about what about having collaboration with your outgoing host beforehand? That was for our web viewers. Any more questions for Hiske? So, no? We will have some more time for discussion after the next talk as well. I just want to give you this very small token of our appreciation. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for sharing this with us. We will have a short break for 10 minutes, and then when we come back, I'll go more in details into the application procedures, the forms, the evaluation, eligibility a bit more again, and what help that you can get. So now 10 minutes, so we start again at 2 o'clock, and I think there's some fruits for you just outside the room. Thank you.